So there's this big new green building policy coming to Ghana. And look, on paper, it sounds fantastic, right? The goal is to make homes more energy efficient and, in turn, more valuable. But, there's often this huge gap between a good idea and what actually works in the real world. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. Which brings us right to the heart of the issue, laid out in a fascinating paper from the Property Economist. It kicks off with a pretty stark warning. The core question is, what happens if you introduce a brilliant policy and the market just doesn't care? Now, let's be clear. This isn't about bashing green buildings. It's a hard look at what it actually takes to make them a reality.
Okay, so this policy isn't brand new. It's based on a model that's been tried and tested in Europe, and it's worked really well there. So you have to ask, right? Why wouldn't it just work in Ghana too? I mean, what's the big deal? Why can't you just copy and paste a successful policy? Well, that's the big question we're going to unpack. All right, first things first. Let's talk about what this policy is actually promising. The whole thing is built around these things called Energy Performance Certificates, or EPCs for short. The easiest way to think about them is like a report card for your house, but for its energy use. And the logic behind it? It's actually super simple and, honestly, pretty appealing. This idea is called the green premium. Basically, if your house is good at saving energy, you get this official certificate that proves it. And when a buyer sees that certificate, they're willing to pay you more money for your house because, hey, they know they're going to save a ton on electricity bills later. So the seller gets more cash, the buyer gets a cheaper to run home, and it's good for the planet. It's a win-win-win. What's not to love? And look, this isn't just some nice theory. We've got the hard data to prove it. You look at the Netherlands. A top-rated A home sells for 5% more. That's real money. Then you've got London's office market. If you have a bad rating there, you're looking at a forced discount of up to 18%. That's huge. So yeah, these numbers show that when the conditions are right, these little certificates pack a serious financial punch. Okay, but, and this is the big but, here's where the story takes a sharp turn. It turns out the magic isn't actually in the certificate itself. Nope. It's all about the market conditions surrounding it. And that's where we get this tale of two very, very different markets. This quote from the research just nails it. It lays out the whole argument perfectly. It says, you know that European success story? It's standing on these four strong pillars. Energy prices that reflect the real cost, a ton of available mortgage loans, property valuers who actually understand this stuff, and buyers who know what to look for. And the paper's core argument is that in Ghana, well, those pillars just aren't there yet. Okay, so let's get into the weeds. Let's break down exactly why this whole green premium idea might just fall flat. The paper points to these key structural gaps between what works in Europe and the reality on the ground in Ghana. And this table just lays the disconnect out so clearly. So in Europe, electricity is expensive, right? So saving energy saves you a lot of money. The incentive is real. But in Ghana, electricity is subsidized. So the savings from being efficient, they're just not that impressive. Then you've got mortgages. In Europe, you can get a long-term loan to buy a house. In Ghana, the market is shallow. Loans are short-term with really high interest rates. And then there's just awareness. The data shows that fewer than 10% of people in Sub-Saharan African cities even know these rating systems exist. Okay, let's zoom in on one of those gaps for a second. Just look at this number, 0.5%. So what on earth is that? Well, that's Ghana's entire mortgage market as a slice of its total economy. It's tiny. And this chart really just drives the point home. You've got places like Germany and the UK where mortgage debt is over 50% of GDP, and Ghana, 0.5%. The difference is just staggering. And here's why that matters so much. If people can't get those long-term loans, how are they supposed to pay extra today for a house that will save them money way down the line? That whole financial engine just isn't there. All right, here's another number for you. And honestly, this one might be the biggest bombshell of them all. 0 out of 55. So researchers went and surveyed 55 professional property valuation firms in Ghana. And they asked, how many of you systematically factor energy efficiency into how you value a property? The answer? Not a single one. 0. This, right here, is what the paper calls the valuation bottleneck. And you guys, this is the absolute key to the whole thing. Think about it. A buyer could be totally willing to pay more for an energy-efficient home. But if the professional valuer, the person the bank trusts, writes a report saying it's not worth any extra, the bank isn't going to lend the extra money. And just like that, the entire green premium idea completely falls apart. It hits a brick wall right here.
So let's walk through how this premium is supposed to work step by step. It's like a 3-link chain, and every link has to be strong for it to work. Step 1, the buyer wants to pay more. Step 2, the valuer officially agrees it's worth more. Step 3, the bank lends the extra money based on that valuation. But like we just saw with that big zero, in Ghana, that second link is completely broken. The valuers don't have the training or the data to put a price on efficiency, so the chain snaps before it even gets started.
And if all that wasn't enough, there's another massive hurdle, the rental market. Get this, in Ghana's cities, something like 60% of households are renters. This creates a classic problem that economists call a split incentive. I mean, just think it through. Why would a landlord shell out their own money to upgrade a building's efficiency when the tenant is the one who gets all the benefit from lower electricity bills? The landlord doesn't see a dime of that savings. The incentive is, well, it's split.
Okay, so you have a market that's just not ready for this. What happens when you drop the policy in anyway? Well, the paper warns that it's not just that the policy could fail. It could actually do real harm. It could become what's known as a paper tiger. It looks impressive, but it has no teeth.
So you're looking at two main possibilities here. Best case scenario, the whole thing just becomes a meaningless bureaucratic exercise. People get the paper to be compliant, but nothing actually changes. But the worst case scenario, that's if the government decides to add penalties for bad ratings down the road. Suddenly, you're forcing discounts on properties. And who owns the older, less efficient buildings? Often, it's the people with the least money to spare.
And that really forces us to ask a pretty tough question. Is it possible that a policy, created with the absolute best intentions to help people, could end up penalizing the very households it's supposed to protect? That's a massive risk when you put a policy in place before the groundwork is done. So where do we go from here? What's the answer? Well, the paper is really clear on this. It doesn't say give up, not at all. It says you have to build the market first. Basically, you can't just airdrop the policy in and hope for the best. You have to patiently build the foundation it needs to actually succeed. And here's the roadmap they suggest. It's a really practical, step-by-step plan. You don't do it all at once. First, you start small, maybe just with new buildings. That lets you train people and build up expertise. Second, you have to make those energy savings actually mean something financially. That means letting electricity prices reflect what they really cost. Third, you got to get the banks on board. Work with them to create special green mortgages that reward people for buying efficient homes. And finally, and this is so critical, you have to train the valuers. You have to give them the tools they need to fix that broken link in the chain we talked about earlier. You know, this final quote from the paper just sums up the entire argument perfectly. In EPC, this certificate, it's supposed to be a signal to the market. But think about it. If no one, not the buyers, not the valuers, not the banks, if nobody is receiving that signal, or if they don't understand it or trust it, then it's not a policy. It's just a piece of paper. And that really leaves us with the much bigger question, one that goes way beyond just Ghana or green buildings. We live in a world that's full of great ideas. The challenge is, how do we make sure the policies we create are actually built for the messy reality of a specific place, and not just for a clean, simple plan on a whiteboard? That, I think, is the real challenge here.